Well, thank you, Nova, and thanks for everybody coming in this morning. So it's filling up nicely, which is good. And I think it's my job to basically pick up a little bit of pace, so we're back in schedule, so don't lose too much time in the back. My name is Sebastian Schmid. As Nova just mentioned, I'm chief editor of Börsen Zeitung, which is more of a traditional paper. So this is a topic that we certainly have a lot to learn about. So I'm quite interested that I have such a great panel here. Do a quick introduction. Maybe introduce yourself. I wrote something down, but let's start with Sascha. Sascha in the back here. We'll just stay with you as an English with the first name. Is this fine with you? Okay.
Yes,
Great.
absolutely.
Sascha, maybe we start in the back then. He's working for dwpbank and is leading the digitalization and of dwpbank since 2021 and is responsible on many topics, but he's probably going to say something himself real quick.
Yeah, thank you. And good morning, everybody. My name is Sascha Dölker. I'm head of digitization. Basically, my team and I are working on AI, obviously, and digital assets. So it's kind of interesting to come back to the crypto assets conference for AI now as well, because I see a lot of convergence coming to this topic as well. Further topics are data science and innovation management in my department.
Well, next up is Christoph Rabenseifner from Deutsche Bank.
Actually, it's Florian Kittelmann from Alstom.
So
I'm a little bit of a...
Sorry, I got you mixed up.
Of an odd person here because we build trains and I'm responsible for autonomous mobility at Alstom. And within autonomous mobility, actually, we're looking at sort of proof of data provenance and those kind of elements. We're looking at how to use AI. So there's a little bit of an industrial touch to how we can actually use open blockchain ecosystems in the industry, which I guess, some of you have been waiting for, that it actually evolves. And that's what I'm looking at.
Thank you so much. Well, we stay in industry. Sarah Lewandowski, there's no mix-up of possibility here.
Yes, I think I'm the next odd person in the room, right? So also Bayer, life science company. And I'm responsible heading up the Department for Technology Innovation and AI globally, and therefore I'm also responsible for responsible AI at Bayer, which includes topics like EU AI Act and all kind of regulations of the world in also a regulated industry. So I think this is what we are sharing. You, banking industry, all regulated industries, CE marks, welcome to the world of medicine. We have a lot of CE marks in our world. I guess now banking will experience the same.
Yeah, and then we have Alexander de Toro Barba, who's with Google, Google Cloud, I think. But maybe you say a couple of words about you too.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm Alex. I'm machine learning and quantum computing specialist at Google Cloud. So quantum is the part that breaks crypto then, depending on the technology behind. I'm since Google, with Google since more than 7 years. I also made my PhD in machine learning for finance. And yeah, mostly working for the regulated industry, pharma, chemistry, defense, and finance.
Okay, well, now finally, Sascha Dölker, please introduce yourself.
Christoph Rabenseifner.
Christoph Rabenseifner. We got it running again, of course.
We'll make that fit until the end of the session. Christoph Rabenseifner, I'm running our strategy and innovation team in technology in Deutsche Bank, responsible obviously also for the bank-wide AI program in that sense, and working closely with all of our technology partners such as Google Cloud to actually create value out of AI, which is the big challenge at the moment.
Well, thank you, Christoph. And well, let's get into the discussion, I guess. Yeah, I shouldn't have written down in a certain order, so I get it mixed up all the time. Just looked at that. Thank you. Well, first, we just were talking about the regulation and the AI Act. Maybe let's start there. In the first keynote this morning, we heard that it's a ridiculously different approach to regulating AI. And maybe, well, start with something ridiculous. What is so ridiculous about it? Let's start in a little broader. And is there something that you think like that is ridiculously positively different than how AI is regulated in other places, and something that's probably ridiculously negative that we should think about while still implementing it and maybe changing it? I'll give Miss or Sarah, the first word maybe, and then we'll go through.
Okay. So I think in general, that was also quite of the note we had in the keynote prior to that. It does come with a lot of burden to most likely all of us because, and this is what I'm also constantly talking to the regulators, this EU AI Act will not just hit Google and AWS of the world, but it will hit every company who's basically leveraging LLM models in their products, and therefore we'll be a provider. So also we at Bayer, or you look at Merck, DM, wherever you see they have an internal MyGPT, MyGenesys, DMGPT, however you want to call it. You're a provider, and basically the full force of the regulation will hit you. Also in regards of documentation, but also in regards of what you have to disclose about your AI. So therefore, it's not just a topic of overhead for documentation, but also a topic of IP, because you cannot have IP on your large language models if you retrain them. If you have to disclose too much, basically everyone can re-leverage your model what you have, right? So therefore, there are a lot of implications which come to that, where I'm skeptical personally about that. When you're asking me what has been done in a good way, I think is the risk classification. So when you talk about that we are going on a risk-based approach, how to regulate AI, I think this has been a good thought starter, but then down the road somewhere, it feels like getting lost in how we are actually able to regulate AI in the end.
Maybe Florian, you can.
It's an interesting perspective because in the rail industry, as you may expect, that we're regulated pretty hard on how to get trains homologated into service and those kind of elements. So the rules are pretty strict. And what I'm missing in the AI Act is exactly that, where we're saying the rules are super strict, you need to get regulated, everything has to be reviewed, but there is not a real response as to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So which risk, like what is the likelihood ratio that you need to demonstrate? And this is what I'm missing, because I would have liked to say, okay, if you've got a Six Sigma approach, redundant, AI models that you can check, and therefore, you're able to demonstrate, let's say, that the stress worthiness or the acceptability of an AI model. That's what I would have liked to see, but actually we're just given a very vague, you need to check with a regulatory office, and therefore actually the decision has been delegated onto a certain working level where you're going to depend on the person that is reviewing the case. And that's something that gives a lot of insecurity as to how you want to go forward with AI-based, let's say, industrial products.
So how do you work with that insecurity?
Actually, we're not using AI models in those kind of regulatory environments. So if I give you the example of autonomous trains, okay, so you've got perception algorithms where we're saying, can you detect an obstacle, yes or no? There is no regulation whatsoever to say you need to detect an obstacle, with this likelihood ratio at 50 meters. There is nothing. So what we're saying is actually we can do everything you want, but just tell us how good we're supposed to be. And that's what we're missing right now, is this whole thing of how high do we need to jump? And I think this is the biggest uncertainty that the entire industry, or all industries, are facing right now.
So does it mean that you need actually more regulation there, more defined regulation for what you're actually trying to achieve, and that is slowing down the process, not so much the technology?
I would say so. Technology-wise, we're there. It's just the fact of, how do you prove the technology, and how can you then all know that if you're jumping so high, it's good enough?
Now let's get over to banking. I think in Frankfurt it's just, well, it's certainly the topic that most of us here may be interested in. Sascha, where do you stand when it comes to the AI Act, and what are you using right now, and what are you exploring, and what do you think is maybe making it easier and harder with the AI?
I think actually AI shows that it's not that different in financial services compared to what just has been said about other industries, to be honest, because how high to jump is really an issue as well in financial services, in my opinion, because the good thing about the AI Act and the new approach is that there is a new approach, to be honest, that we recognize AI as something not special, but transformative actually. However, the transition from theory into practice is exactly what we are struggling with as well. Of course, banking always says we are highly regulated, more regulated than others. It's not true, as we see here with the other panelists, but how to deal with that. So basically, after Lehman 2007, we have a lot of regulation in the banking domain. We have a lot of expert opinion in the game, also from a regulatory perspective. And actually what I would like to stress is that it's also an organizational and mindset shift, to be honest, to put these pieces together, because of course we have a lot of experts showing what risks are involved getting AI done, but we should also embrace the opportunities to change organization mindset on a broader level. And I think that is a struggle everybody is currently in, but in banking, I think it's especially in one point, because the regulator has pushed us since Lehman also to act almost like machines. So we instrive our risk departments, our operations units, that everybody is more working as a machine, and now we are telling them the machines are more intelligent. So my point is, I think we are not yet sure what AI stands for. Is it augmented intelligence? Is it artificial intelligence? Is it automated intelligence? I think that is something that has to be figured out on the way transitioning from theory to practice.
Probably maybe all of it, just by use case, but maybe Christoph can well add to that.
Yeah, let me pick up on what you just said a second ago on thinking like a machine or acting like a machine, right? Banks, insurers, the financial industry has been used to machine learning for decades, right? And all of that thinking around that was rules-based. So regulators, any regulation around the globe is actually expecting us to explain the results of our models, financial modeling, risk models, and so on and so forth. So actually, banks are used to that level of scrutiny. It's hard to fit large language models in particular into that framework, because regulators are asking for perfect results, and this is an ongoing discussion. But coming back to your initial question where you said, what is ridiculous about the AI Act? We can discuss in detail what regulations are fit for purpose and what not, and where we need to probably detail it out a bit more. The step I would like to take back is, in the first place, we have an EU AI Act. Europe has taken a completely different path to other regions in the world. We don't know yet how that plays out and which strategy is actually the successful one. But all of us here with a location or headquarter in Europe need to assess what the opportunity is of being highly regulated from the first step on in that journey versus our global competition, right? Players in the US, players in Asia work in a different environment, and we need to deal with that. And in particular, if we work with global clients as well, because they will utilize other tools which we are not allowed to, for the better or worse. But it's, I think, something that needs to be solved so that European companies are competitive in the future.
Well, you gave me the perfect segue here to Alexander, who's actually working with Google, obviously a global company who has probably the best insight into what's possible outside, what they can offer clients outside of Europe, what they do with partners here in Europe. So how do you see the AI Act, with a global point of view?
So we definitely don't do in other regions different things than here. So it's like when I talked to an English bank some time ago, they said they take the most conservative market as the benchmark, and we do the same. So we don't act differently in other markets. On the positive side, when I look back, when we had, for example, some end consumer regulations in 2017 and 18, other markets actually followed. I remember that China noticed that they had a lot of problems with end consumer rights, and then they also established these rules in 2020, 21. California the same. So we can act here as a pioneer. To play the devil's advocate, when I just listened to that, because I worked before Google and Robo-Advice, we had a lot of regulation at that time, and more than 60% of the investments went actually into MiFID and all the other regulations. We also had at that time things like tracing, data lineage, that you store your model, versionize, you can say 5 or 10 years in the future, which model did you use, with which data did you train it? So I'm just playing the devil's advocate. What is the add value of the AI Act when we had these kind of regulations already before? With the difference that we have now generative models where you cannot 100% predict the outcome again and again. But then we come to this point that you mentioned, if I set a benchmark, like it doesn't matter how you get there, you just need to reach this level of security. You don't define the way because it's kind of a Chinese way that you say you have to do this and not that. No, you have to reach this goal, but check the way you figured it out. But yeah, I'm thinking a little bit because a lot of things in my daily work with customers haven't changed so much. We still need to trace a lot, monitor, observe, and put that back in a backlog that we can take it again. I don't know, from your practice, had something changed besides reporting, but from the applied AI part?
Well, for us, we're partially also in high-risk applications with pharmaceuticals. So therefore, you think about how you act, especially currently, as code of conduct is not published yet. So the translation of the AI Act, what it really means. And there's a lot of uncertainty in regards how some of those regulations really translate into practice. So what we really have to document, what we have to display. So therefore, I do see in the life science industry, at least, that people do hold back with innovation. Also in the chemical industry, as they are not sure what would be the return on investment based on what you will have to do afterwards, right? And concerning, so I do see that there's holdbacks of innovation due to a UAI Act in the industry.
Yeah, I tend to agree that there's a lot of uncertainty, and especially when you look from industrial perspective into maintenance planning, critical infrastructure monitoring and those kind of elements, you're not sure nowadays anymore if you can actually use an AI model that is learning and how to monitor this. So what I'm looking in is also a question of data provenance as to how can you prove where you have the data from, how you train your models. So it becomes a wider topic, and I look at AI just as one piece of the puzzle. It's one algorithm that you run, and then within your whole software stack, you have to isolate that brick and demonstrate that this brick is giving a certain result. And then how do you manage, the whole question of hallucination within that, which you can easily do. You can just create thresholds, and then you say if something, if the result comes outside the threshold that you would expect, you just ignore it, or you put it into a via validation loop. So all of that is possible, and this is what I mean when I'm saying, well, I'm missing a little bit the clearer guidance when it comes to how to develop, because AI is such an opaque name, but it is nowadays used for everything. And if you talk to software engineers, they're actually saying, well, AI has been around for ages, and now suddenly we're making such a big fuss out of it because there's Gen AI coming up. So I'm not sure if we're doing ourselves a favor in the way we're regulating it.
Well, but I mean, they took a step in saying the bigger the model, the higher the risk.
Maybe to address your question, actually, I don't think it's so much different as well to what you described for robo-advisor and so on. I think it's about putting it on organizational wide, so putting it on scale, actually, what the challenge is, because it comes with implications regarding legacy infrastructure, legacy processes. It's all about shaping business processes, in my opinion, and putting these pieces together. I think that's the challenge that comes out of putting it on a large scale instead of putting it into a silo, to stress that word, for example, to calculate risk models, which we did for years already, but putting it combined for an organizational-wide risk and not a specific risk, for example, I think it comes with implications and challenges. So it's really interesting to look at it on a large scale and to have these categories actually going forward. The risk classifications and, of course, provider and deployer model.
Maybe to chime in on that, that will be even more interesting because we're moving towards these agentic systems where you had before the microservices, and each one was kind of fixed algorithm, but now each microservice is actually a Gen AI agent that learns. So you actually get a huge, you have a meta agent and then small agents that are work together. So you get machine learning more and more baked into different areas in the system than before. That makes it more complex when you, what you described then, when you have these challenges.
Yeah, right. Because basically we're talking about, well, software that rewrites basically itself in a learning way. So which means there's no way, there's no iterations that somebody can check and, this is the new one. Now I have a look at it. This is how it works, and that's what we changed. It's not like that, right? So it's and it is also global. I mean, it's in every aspect of in every industry, basically, potentially. So what would be your suggestion? How to basically regulate differently? What are points that could actually help us also getting the risks in check, having the risks in check, but also on the other hand, making it handleable? Because I think, well, if I listen to that, mind me, I mean, we're talking about deregulation, but this sounds like a giant regulatory task we're up on here, and it's just starting to, just starting to implement this, and the question is how much governance, how much reporting, how much checking, and how much on the policing side will have to be done. And isn't this basically an impossible task on the one hand, and also maybe not leading to the results we want?
Sorry. Can I just, before you start, challenge one thing that you said,
Okay.
which said it can change basically everything automatically. Because if we look at the current level of implementation of AI, and in particular generative AI, right, it's important to see that while the agentic vision and that this will be the future, I think everyone agrees on that there will be more of that. If we are looking at current tools, most of them involve a human in a certain stage, right? The typical human in a loop concept. Just as a concrete example, when we are talking about software development, we had lengthy discussions in our firm when we introduced software code assistance, right? There are various tools out there that you can implement. Every line of code, every application that is released within our firm runs through a software development lifecycle. There are code checks, there are certain toll gates, there's testing, there's everything. All of that applies also if you use an AI-based tool to create that code, right? There's no difference. There will be, at the moment, no AI changing the code base of Deutsche Bank. And I'm pretty sure that is true for most of the companies, including Google, by the way, even though you say 25% of your code base is AI generated, right? Sundar mentioned that in one of his investor calls. Let's not exaggerate what AI is doing at the moment. There are means to control it, and we will find out a way to also enable agentic AI and more straight through basically AI in all of our processes.
Yeah, I was more looking at several years into the future here, I guess. But
like 2.
It's getting very fast. I think what's regulation itself is quite helpful because it gives really a common level of understanding for everyone. And that was, I think, also an advantage of European economy in the last centuries versus, Darren Acemoglu, who got the Nobel Prize, I think last year, 2 years ago, he emphasized that why Europe got rich was mostly because we had clear rules and not a king or a sultan or whoever that just took everything away from one day to the other. But the problem with the AI regulation is when we have different interpretations, you suddenly get more insecurity than actually security, and that makes it a little bit challenging. There's also one part, when you think about foundational models and fine-tuned models, suddenly the deployer becomes the creator of a model, like Deutsche Bank or Bayer, they use foundational models like Llama from Facebook or Gemini from us, then they fine-tune it or they're continuously pre-training, and suddenly they're on our side. So the lines are blurring a lot, and that is not quite clearly defined yet as far as I understood the regulation. And these insecurities makes it hard.
so should there be like a third group, like deployer? then we have the provider and then something in between.
I think the best is that what was mentioned before, that we have a common, like we had in the past also with risk, that what is the goal that you should achieve and how you achieve that, if you're a provider or a deployer or whatever, that is then secondary to it, just that you reach a certain level of risk control and transparency. And we have, for example, also AI transparency tools for many years on the market, not we also, but generally the entire AI industry. So these tools exist, and we can take any of these tools, but we need to understand where's the benchmark that everyone has to achieve.
Yeah, I do like the part of what is actually the objective we want to achieve. So is it being secure over a certain threshold or whatsoever? And I can always, what I always give as an example is the MDR, right? It's the medical device regulation. It was the easiest in the world. So we had a lot of innovation in Europe afterwards, and I'm making that kind of easy now, right? Then something happened. There was a bad guy, took advantage, something happened, people died. Revision of the MDR with the goal of no one dying from medical devices. Well, how do you reach that? You have no medical devices in Europe. Then nobody would die, right? What we see is innovation going away from the European market. So we could also learn from existing regulations and what we have done there, what are the effects, and think about, okay, maybe not having anyone harmed. That's not the goal, because the goal how you would achieve that is not having AI in Europe. So what is actually the goal?
That's what an aviation customer told me 2 weeks ago. If we want to have 100% secure planes, then you don't even start.
Exactly, just don't build planes, yeah.
Yeah, I think within the rail industry, it's exactly the same, because what happened, a couple of years back is that there was a big rail crash, and then suddenly the employees of the Eisenbahnbundesamt were personally prosecuted for their rail crash because they made a mistake. And the result is that there's high regulation, nobody takes the decision anymore, et cetera, et cetera. So it's super difficult when we're in this situation where personally, you're making people personally liable for their job, and then you're putting them in front of the court, which is, I think, in the US, a lot more common than in Europe. And that's something we should avoid with regulation, because we should assume that people are doing their job in the best purpose, and then if there's a sort of a willingness to do wrong, I mean, like we're seeing sometimes in the financial markets, then we should prosecute this. But I think just doing a mistake should not be what we're looking at here, and this is what I'm afraid of with this AI Act, is that there's so much insecurity that people are prone not to do anything because they're afraid of making a mistake.
Well, you were talking about investments there. That's maybe the point we should talk about now with the current state of regulation and also technology. Where are investments made in Europe? Because it seems, maybe a good way forward here. And where are probably investments lacking? Where are investments avoided or made elsewhere when it comes to AI?
You mean investments from the companies,
yeah,
or
the companies? Yeah, where do companies invest? Say like, okay, this is where we go, where we start with AI, with the security we have. Where do you go personally, basically? Because you probably can't speak for other companies, even though I know you probably. I think you worked with some others in the past. But for now, where are you? Where's Bayer investing in AI technology? Where's Alstom and DWP and Deutsche Bank, etc. in Europe?
Oh, well, for us, we're a global company, and our clear goal is to be an AI-driven company, right? So when you're talking about agents, that's for us not multiple years away, most likely. Also multi-agent systems. So therefore, investments are being done also on a global level, but we have partnerships with Google in radiology, and those are also global products we supply. But a question we need to ask ourselves in the future is, might we have products which are only deployed in the US or somewhere else due to AI? I mean, we have those regulations based on whether a product gets the certificate in certain markets, right? But if now AI would add to that, what does it mean? And we see that already with, Google might not be doing that, but we see that with the GPT models and other models which are being deployed in the US. which are not being deployed in Europe, which just increases for us complexity to manage our internal tools, which are relying on, yeah, those kind of large language models as well. If we have to have multiple instances of that, do we have to, you know, so there are a lot of things we have to do, but asking the questions, where do we invest? We invest also in global tools with a clear goal of being an AI-driven company.
Yes, I think it's the same for almost everybody because agentic AI, I think, is the focal point for the next years. But actually investment and adoption is driven, in my opinion, due to three things, actually. It's expectation, it's understanding, and imagination, to be honest. Because expectation, of course, is high. ChatGPT has put AI into our hands, literally. So everybody is expecting quite a lot. And what does it do currently? Not that much. It's just telling us information, to be honest. So everybody that puts investment in says, oh, it's only a glorified chatbot at the beginning. I think, therefore, understanding is really important, to understand what is expectation management for today and tomorrow and how to divert investments in the correct way. And it's not only technology, it's not only provider, it's also mindset, organization. That's something I like to stress very often, because you can put a million into it and get nothing out of it, to be honest. That's why the understanding part is so important. And the third one is imagination, because what I said about at least the financial service industry, we always try to find a problem that is solved by technology. And when you look at AI only as technology, you will deploy it in a sequential process only, in my opinion. And I think that's why understanding is so important, to create that imagination and outside thinking of the box. And actually, for me, it's a circle. So expectation, understanding, and imagination is leveling up your AI maturity, and therefore the proper fit of your investments. And I think that's also a C-level topic, in my opinion, to create that understanding, to put the money, especially when it's a scarce resource, where it creates the most benefit, and not only put it into the AI buzzword, in my opinion. I think that's a real issue at the moment still.
That I have a direct question to that. I mean, you say it's a C-level decision. Yes, certainly it is. I mean, it's a huge investment and everything, and there's also some global knowledge that needs to be done. But when it comes to the benefits of AI, would it need to be more bottom-up than top-down, basically, with somebody who is very close to the processes, very close to the problem that actually needs to an understanding of what could be solved potentially, and then obviously somebody else may be helping, you know, to get there. But especially when you look at something top down, couldn't that be the risk that you try to solve a problem that you see but don't really understand enough, and then the solution is maybe, you know, taken forever to get where you actually need to be as good as it needs to be, to have the efficiency gains?
It's a great point. It's actually, for me, a cross-functional endeavor, to be honest. It needs both, to be honest. To break out of silo thinking and to break out of just putting it into the processes we have, because AI is about learning, applying new abilities, and not only to optimize current abilities. And that's something that C-level often does at the beginning when AI is deployed, I think, in my opinion.
And just to add to that, I agree to the full concept, right? You need both. If I look at our firm, every application, every use case that we are pursuing in generative AI is driven by the business or an infrastructure function that wants to solve a real problem. I think that is essential, because otherwise you are introducing a technology just for the sake of introducing a technology, which doesn't create value in the first place. What is equally important is that we have that huge opportunity right now to implement a technology in a proper manner. What do I mean by proper manner? Especially in banking, we all know, and I'm sure that's similar in other industries as well. In the past, there have been hundreds, thousands of applications being created in banks, right? And we find ourselves in a very complex technology landscape. Currently, we are risking that we do the same with generative AI, right? Every business division, every department is deploying their own application, their own model, their own, you name it. Therefore, we have chosen that we will have a central team that is actually looking at the entire landscape, which we need to have anyway, because we need to be or have the information for our regulators, that is then looking into which are actually the models we want to use, which are the frameworks we want to implement, so that we have a common denominator across the firm. Your question on investment, and I don't want to add to what has already been said, because that's very similar in our firm. Let me give you a perspective from the external investments. I'm running our corporate venture capital group as well in Deutsche Bank. And besides all the global investment teams, such as cybersecurity and so on, there's one particular theme that is evident at the moment, which is European sovereignty. Right? There are questions Sarah mentioned in the beginning. How do we deal with IP that has been used for training foundational models? We heard about the AI Act just a few minutes ago. There will be a point in time where there will be a question on the table: are current foundational models actually compliant to the AI Act, because they used a lot of internet data? How do we deal with that? And that's a big investment question. There are a few providers who have tried to train models on really strict rules of what data they use, what IP they use. It's an ongoing theme. And I think this, in addition to investment in infrastructure, as we have seen by few announcements in Germany, in France in the past couple of weeks, and let's not discuss whether the numbers that have been mentioned in those announcements are real, but there will be investment in AI infrastructure as well in Europe, and that's needed, it's required to stay competitive as a region.
Maybe I 100% agree also on the investment side, maybe looking at the benefit side, because you also mentioned we shouldn't just do it for introducing tech or whatever. I mean, we rolled out our internal tool to 40,000 people. It's being leveraged by 27,000 people. So adding to you, people need to understand how it works. We have 1.5 million prompts per month. If you calculate 1 minute of saving per prompt, you're at 25,000 hours saved per month with an internal tool we rolled out to enable everyone at Bayer. And I do believe if you have the mindset, and this is adding to what you said, you shouldn't, like in the beginning, having the mushroom, that's fine. I mean, everyone is testing it out. But having then a central tool which is secure, safe, compliant, in line with the regulation, which everyone can use, everyone can build assistants, agent workflows and whatsoever, people will start to understand and imagine, how does my future workflow look like? And I mean, people are using it however they want to, but in dedicated areas, we changed the whole operating way. Like the whole end-to-end process is now supported by our internal tool. And we reduce, well, I think every measure you have in this process. So adding to what you said, I 100% agree. It should be driven centrally to really have the power and put eggs in one basket, which is probably not a German thing normally to do, but rather spread the butter thin. We should put it into one basket and say, this is our future, because it will also be our future digital workforce.
Yeah, I tend to agree with this, because if we're letting every division, every business unit develop their own models, in the end we're going to have a mess. So if you think of this, we have a great opportunity to actually redefine business processes and then take out of that business process where we actually want to use AI and where we don't want to use it, because we're saying there's a certain risk threshold. And I think that's the opportunity that is the big digital transformation opportunity. So when I talk to our customers, for example, about how to introduce autonomous trains, etc., in their business processes, I discover that there's so much manual work right now that they don't even understand exactly how they're running their process right now, because it's like, okay, I call this person and this person calls that person and that person tells me then that I have to do this. And then I'm saying, okay, so we're actually so far away from an end-to-end digital process that we're not even able to say where in that process AI makes sense, which is where I think the bottom-up way would not work, because then you would take individual chunks and say, well, let's try to use AI here and there, and then you're over-investing and the business case doesn't stack up. So what we need to do is to have this sort of top-down process where we're then saying within that process, there are 5 steps which are clearly AI driven, and those models are going to be sound models which are developed and governed centrally.
And maybe adding for 5 seconds, there are more and more models coming out, so this platform approach is really important, that you can choose. The models in the future might not even have been developed now. No.
Okay, well, thank you so much. The time is up. I think I've learned way more than your names, which is great. And there's so many topics to talk about. I guess you guys, or at least some of you, will certainly be around to talk about it, because I think one question that still remains in the open, I think, is we have very strong and big companies here represented on the panel today, but obviously there are smaller players that have probably different questions and different, but the day is long and we'll have a lot of discussions to follow. And thank you so much for your insights. And I hope everybody had an interesting conversation here. Thanks. And have a great day here.